We got our thing. Okay. Well, welcome everyone. It's about 10, so we're going to go ahead and get started. I know some people are still wondering in, but sorry, what was that? Oh, just radio. Okay. So, um, we're the team from the WP Carey Technology Strategy Operations. We are responsible for putting together dashboards, data reports, all those kinds of fun things that we work with. And interesting about our team is we all more or less kind of started at the same time here, about February through April. Yeah. So we were all kind of wandering around trying to find answers to these questions that we're hoping our presentation can help answer for other people who may be starting out and struggling a little bit. So go ahead and advance us, please. I'm Matt Clements. This is Tia Leonard. This is Adam Dahl. And we're going to go ahead and kick things off. Tia is going to start this by talking about, go ahead and go our next here. By starting talking about the project scope. Oh yeah, that's right. Please make sure and watch what you're throwing out. I forgot about this slide.
All right, do you want to? Okay, you can advance to the next slide. So the most of this presentation is going to be done by Matt and Adam. I'm the senior business analyst, so I'm going to talk about the catalyst for this work and why we were doing it in the first place. So we were asked by WP Carey's executive education team about a year ago. Now, I came on board, and about 3 or 4 months prior to when I came on board, they approached us, a brand new team, just a few people, mostly leadership and a couple of student workers, with absolutely no technology really to speak of. They worked off of spreadsheets, and a lot of what they were doing was manual, manually getting data from here, copying, pasting it, putting it over there. And so we embarked on kind of a larger project to help them ramp up technology infrastructure. And one of the projects from that larger one was this that Matt and Adam are going to speak about. But they really needed a way to track their sales revenue against their sales targets. This is an income producing group. They are working with learners, professional people who, generally speaking, already have gone through school and are now executives and going back for some additional education. They wanted a way to summarize the progress of their programs, as well as just having an organized registration data set. They have learners who would register for their programs, but they had no way, if you were to say to them, how many people registered do you have? They don't know the answer to that. They didn't know the answer to that because the data was just everywhere, primarily offline, either in Google Sheets or a variety of Excel spreadsheets. We can go to the next slide. So where were we starting from? They had no CRM. We are still working on that, getting onto a couple of different Salesforces because of their constituent base is very diverse. No automated reporting. All of the reporting they were doing and up until this point was manual, copying and pasting. And even within Stovo, where their learners were registering, the team was, again, very small, very new, and was not always aware of all of the things that they could do to produce reports. So their reports were very decentralized. They didn't have like a single snapshot for all of their programs. And they have multiple sources of data for enrollments. They have enrollments coming through Career Catalyst, through the LE Salesforce, as well as through Stova. Okay, next slide. So lastly, I'll just talk about the goals specifically for this project. The scope narrowed quite a bit. It started broad and then got narrower and narrower as we learned more about the data. So we started off with 1 and then decided on 2 live real-time reports, a sales report that was essentially a summary, and then a registration report. Same data set, by the way, just 2 different views of that data. That summarized the program revenue in real time was important to them. Sometimes the dean or assistant dean or some other dean would be asking for revenue numbers, and they didn't have a way to get that quickly. So they were looking for something that they could just go to online that would tell them where they were today. We were really trying to eliminate a lot of the manual work, especially because this manual work was done by student workers. And if you know anything about working with student workers, they go home in the summertime. So that meant that in the summer, there was nobody to get this information for them. And we really wanted to make this something that they could operate with all year. And then, so ultimately the project was split into one, getting that connection to Stova, which is formerly Eventry, and then working with that data to produce these reports. And are you next, or Adam? Okay, and Matt is next, and that ends my portion.
Thank you, Tia. Go ahead and advance past this. So the basis for doing any work here, we found that we needed to sign up and get requests in, and basically it took us, I don't know, a month to get access to the things that we needed to even start working. So we looked at the service catalog and started asking questions. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And we said, okay, what do we need to do first? Well, first we need a BI desktop. Got to have a workspace. So by the way, all of these links, they'll be attached to the presentation. And when you're looking at the recordings, you should be able to see them down there in the description area. So we started with this. You get a BI desktop. There is 2 tiers. Most people are good with the black tier. However, if you're working with a lot of data, and you'll find out very quickly if you're working with a lot of data because you crash your desktop if you do, you then can request an upgrade to the maroon one. So that's your starting point. That gets you that AWS desktop. You'll get emails that tell you how to log into it, and all this stuff is pretty straightforward. Go ahead and give us the next one, please. Then you've got to add software. Now, Alteryx is a data prep tool. We use it pretty extensively in this process. You'll maybe not need it. Maybe you do. Go ahead and request it if you do, but they do charge back to your department. So if you don't need it, it's expensive. So, and this is what the form looks like for that. Go ahead and advance us to the next, please. And then the next thing is Tableau. Now we're building this in Tableau. You don't necessarily need to, but it is kind of the latest and greatest, and that's what we went with. The Tableau licenses are requested through this form, and it's approval process just like everything else. Go ahead and advance us. And then we come to the part where things get a little tricky. So if you're publishing a dashboard, you have to have the ability to publish it and a place to publish it to. So this is the analytics portal. It's getting upgraded. I hesitated to put screenshots in because I figured they may not be relevant very shortly, but this is what it looks like now. And at advance, if you click into one of those groups, oh, I forgot this one has times. Go ahead, click again. You'll see this if you're not a member of the group. So typically you'd find that your department or school or whatever would have a group already. You may need to request one if this is not done. There's a whole other form for that. I didn't put this in the slides, but it is out there. So if you are starting out and there is a group, you would see this request access button as you click into the group. So go ahead and advance this again. And if you click that button, it takes you over to the data access request form. Now, this form is used for multiple requests, so you'll see it again later on. But the key part is, and I don't have a pointer or anything, when you're selecting that data area name, you're going to need to be a power user and not a viewer. Viewers, great, you're going to get added to a lot of different groups as a viewer. But if you want to publish to a group, you need to be a power user. And go ahead and advance. That is shown right here. These are your options. You've got your power and user and viewer right at the top. And then you've got the other stuff that we'll cover later. Go ahead and advance this, please. So once you've accessed or once you have put in that request and it has been accepted and you get access as a power user to a group, then you'll have access to the power user lounge group. And I only put this up there because it's an easy way to see what you're going to need to request for your accounts. So you click on this access check in the power user lounge here, and it will bring up this form where you can filter down to a specific username. Now, if you've got someone in your department who's already doing data work, there you go. You look up their name, you see what schemas they have access to. And then here on the next slide, go ahead and click once more. Here you will actually, we're back to that data access request form. The important thing here, though, is you're going to be doing data area name. Like, okay, so the key things, the data area type and the data area name. Now, when we requested our power user access, the data area type was analytics portal. When it comes to accessing the data, you're going to need to get it from the data warehouse, the AUDB tables, the user database tables, or the ODS. So these are all options under that data area type. As you click them, can we go back twice real quick? Oh, that's all right. Once more. There you go. As we look at this, you see that the schemas are divided into Amazon Redshift Enterprise Data Warehouse up at the top, Aurora User Databases, Operational Data Store, and this is the old Hyperion system. I don't think really anybody should be requesting access to that stuff at this point. I'm not sure. But each one of these has an entry on that access request form. Go ahead and advance for us again, please. So you would pick the data type, enterprise data warehouse for this. We're just grabbing one at random here. So the enterprise data warehouse, go ahead again. And oh, I'm sorry, I thought I had another screenshot. And then you would select the actual data area type after that of whatever, ASU student, ASU human resources, financial aid. All these various schemas give you access to various data areas. So you do have to put in a lot of those. So be prepared for that. And that's why it's good to look at that power user lounge if you can, so you can look at an account that has access that you need and just copy them straight over and just go down the list. And then the last bit is Alteryx. So we signed up and got Alteryx added earlier on, but to actually publish a workflow to the gallery and schedule it, you're going to need gallery access. And you do that by on your AWS desktop, your BI desktop, you go to this link, alteryx.asu.edu/gallery, and create your account. Once you've done that, you fill out the form. And it's very simple. It's not your standard. It has a whole bunch of boxes that you can select drop downs. You actually need to put in some reasoning why you need this access. So get through that and you're basically ready to go at that point. So that's a lot of forms to fill out. I know it's very daunting, but hopefully this is a good primer on it. Go ahead and click advance, please. Now we're talking about what we actually built. We have everything in place. We can start working with our data. And here's Adam to talk about that.
All right, so this isn't necessarily an Alteryx presentation, so I'm going to gloss over the very interesting bits. One thing that is important to note and that I learned the hard way is that if you're going to use Alteryx, you'll need the upgraded BI desktop, or it is very, very slow. So get that upgraded. So here we've got 4 main areas. One is us grabbing the data from the Stova API, which, we were authenticating with it. Working with APIs in Alteryx is not the most pleasant experience, and I will expand on that in 2. So one is authenticating with the API. Two is where we actually do the juicy stuff. We are getting events and attendees for each event from the database. That blue circle there, that's just solid blue, that is a macro that we wrote in Python to make the downloading significantly easier and also faster. So that downloads the events and the attendees. We have a filter on there that uses our existing data that we've already grabbed to make it so the API returns less data, which really speeds up the workflow. So instead of us fetching every event and every attendee every time, we've only fetched the ones that have changed since the workflow last run. Currently, we have it scheduled at an hour. So it's basically anything that's changed in the last hour, we download that. That took our initial run from about an hour just to run, and now it's about 3 minutes on the schedule. And the people managing the Alteryx server will love you for that. And then on 3, we do a little more processing, and then we're adding the attendees to the database. And then 4 is the events. Those get added to the database as well. We have those in separate tables. Those are then used to be joined in Tableau, which we will cover in a moment. So once you've created your Alteryx workflow, you're going to need to save it to the gallery if you want to schedule it, and you probably do want to schedule it. And so it's a bit of a tedious process. Basically what you do, the same way that you would save it as a file, instead you save to the Alteryx gallery, which you will have set up if you follow the steps that Matt said. And then when you upload it, you'll have to give it a name. It'll go to, I'm really not sure if they're going to change the location it goes to. They just made some changes to the gallery and how everything's organized. So that might change in the future. But you're going to upload your workflow. You should add a comment so that people know what it does. And then you will click save, and that'll upload it to the server. And then once you click save, there's a good chance that you will get an error like this. This one is more of a warning than an error. This has happened because of the Python macro that we wrote. It's just some annoying little things with Alteryx. And so you should always read those messages. But since I know exactly what caused this, it's okay to ignore it and continue. And so once you've saved it, it'll give you that view in browser button. And then when you click it, it'll take you to the gallery. You will have to log in, most likely. You'll usually do that 3 or 4 times when you're working with Alteryx. And so clicking that button will take you directly to the workflow page in the gallery. And from there, you can schedule it. You can see up in the top left corner is the schedule button. And when you click that, it'll take you to the scheduling page. There's a couple different options you can choose from. For here, you can see that we have set it to run hourly every 1 hour. The start date, it doesn't really matter. Just choose something in the future. And then put a comment there. Please put a comment there. The people that work on this after you, they won't love you for putting a comment, but they will hate you for not putting a comment. So please put a comment. And then you also want to make sure that that schedule is enabled and give it a good name. I believe ours actually just matches the workflow. And then once you've put in that comment, you'll click save. And from there, it'll take you to the schedule page for that workflow. If it's a new workflow that you've just uploaded and a new schedule, there won't be anything at the bottom, but we published this in, I think, May, June, July, something like that. And so we've had this run quite a bit. You can see it's run 3,090 times. And, that's the mark of a good workflow. It's worked 3,000 times successfully. I'm very proud of that. And so this will show you all the previous runs. If your stakeholder is reporting some sort of problem downstream, this is where you want to go to debug the workflow, or at the very least, make sure that the problem is not the workflow. And then you can also run it manually. And you can also edit an existing job. On the left side, there is, I guess you'd call it a toolbar, and that lets you get to the different workflow results, schedules, and all that if you are just logging into the gallery directly and not actually updating or uploading an existing workflow. And then Matt will present on our database tables that we created.
Thank you, Adam. I will say real quick, when you upload an Alteryx workflow, there is a validate this workflow checkbox. I've seen a lot of the times if you leave that check, it'll error, even though there's nothing wrong with your workflow and it works perfectly fine. So if you uncheck that box, it doesn't validate your workflow, but presumably you did. So that can be a way around that if you run into that issue. Now we'll talk about AUDB tables. Now, AUDB tables, we requested access to a schema during our big long list of form filling out party that we did. And one of those schemas for us, well, two of them were the WP carry specific AUDB schemas. So go ahead and advance. This is dbeaver. This is what the tool that you get access to in your BI desktop and is what you use to do most of your data work. I mean, obviously you use other tools like Alteryx and Tableau, but this is how you write SQL and access the databases, right? So here is just a real quick, we're selecting a single event in both of our event table and the attendee table. Just a real simple select star. We didn't do anything crazy here. When it comes time to actually joining them together, you can do some different things in Tableau, but this is just a look at it. Now, when we get to showing the Tableau, you'll see that most of the people, well, actually you won't because we blanked out significant information about people, but most of the people don't show up because they have canceled or incomplete enrollment. So we didn't want to show all of those, but we do get them, and they do still live in the database. So it's data that's out there. We can use it if we need to in the future. But go ahead and get next slide, please. So once your data is in there and you've explored it and you know what you're doing, then it comes time to slapping it into something like Tableau. Next slide, please. So you start off in Tableau with a blank canvas. Obviously, you're needing to add your data. So go ahead, next slide, please. You'll see that there in the bottom left-hand corner of that is a data source button. Now there's other ways to do it, but that's always the one I end up going to. So if you click on the data source button, you get brought to the Connect tab of Tableau, and you can see that there are many options. You can just do it with an Excel file or a PDF or something like that. But if we connect it directly to a server, in our case, because we're using AUDB tables, we're going to use the Postgres SQL. If we're using just data warehouse data, that's Amazon Redshift. You click on it, it should, I think, automatically fill that for everybody. I don't remember if I had to do that initially or not. It's been so long since I started using it. So in our case, we're using the WPC Tableau app account. The reason you would use an app ID, as they call them here, is so you can embed this login into your Tableau report. And when someone goes to the analytics portal and clicks on it, it does not ask them to log in. That's very important. There are many things out there. You could use your own. It's just fine until you die suddenly, and suddenly it's asking everyone to sign in because your account's disabled. So definitely get one of those app IDs if your department doesn't already have one for this purpose. But it probably does already have one. And if you do get an app ID, your requirement on as a user of that app ID is that you have at least the access that the app ID has. So we looked at that power user lounge earlier and did the access check on the WPC Tableau app ID. And then we made sure that our schemas that we requested were what were on that. Just to start, I've since added probably 20 more. So go ahead, next slide, please. So once we've connected, it starts seeing all of them. Now I should have probably taken a screenshot before I searched, but this would have showed a list of every table in AUDB that we have access to. I filtered it down to just the ones that Adam loaded data into during the Alteryx job. And that is our Stova attendees and Stova events. And very straightforward in our case because it's just two data sources and they are linked by a single ID. So you see here at the top, we made a relation, we added the event table and then we dragged over our attendee table and the little line popped up. And once we clicked on the line, it asked us, what is the relationship? And we selected event ID equals event ID. There are many options there that you can go with. You can do pretty complicated relationships between tables. You can add in multiple tables. I'm doing something now that's got like 10 tables so far. So those relationships can get complicated. Go ahead next, please. So once you've done that, you can actually start adding things. So this is a big part of Tableau is dashboards and workbooks. You make the, I'm sorry, the workbook is what the thing is called. Not a workbook. Forgetting terminology here, but so you add these here and you then can add those on. Once you've built out your view here, you can add that into a dashboard where you put multiple things together. So we started off on this one at 10:30. All right, we've got the data fields that we're using. We threw in here on the rows. We want to see the information for the program name, the status of the event, when it starts, and then weeks out, registrants, and another field that I'm not showing right now. Oh, that's the measure name. I'm sorry. And then two other fields that we're doing it. So these are all row data, and then the columns is the measure name. So Tableau, this isn't like a Tableau how-to, but we're using multiple calculated fields here. We're taking the start date, calculating how far that is away from the current date. And then we're taking the number we get back, which is just number of days. And we're doing another calculated field where we divide that into weeks. We divide it by 7, and then we take the remainder and put those in the days, and we pick the weeks. And that gives us a week out number. And then we are also doing a calculated field for the registrants where we are counting the number of registrants in an event. And then we are also doing a revenue calculation where we add up how much each one of those registrants paid for the event. So all of these things, they get added in those ones that we want to show specifically for the event. Those are the measures. And then we put the measure names up on the columns, and then all the information we want to show about the event goes in the rows. So there's way more complicated stuff you can do. You can get crazy with it. This was just a very simple, here's the data. Next slide, please. Then we would go ahead and we would put it into an actual dashboard. You can see we've got a lot of containers here. Each one of these areas here is a container, and inside each container, sometimes there's more containers. Sometimes there is just like a text box, but we've made one main container what we've got our actual program list sheet in, and then our filters in a box on the left. And we did a lot of formatting here, a lot of color changing. We put in a picture so it looks pretty. And go ahead, next slide, please. And that gave us our sales report. Then we did the same thing, but with our registrant list. Now that was a little bit different. This is intended to be used as its own standalone report, but also to filter down to specific events when they're clicked on the sales report. And that's with a sheet action. So very similar thing as we did on the sales report. This one's, it's literally just that there's no calculations in this, I don't think. Yeah, no, it's not. So we are putting all of the fields we want to see, and we're just sticking them in there. And that was a very simple, straightforward. Go ahead, next slide. And then we put it in a similar thing. Now you'll see over here, we've got these two boxes, total registrants, unique registrants, and I've got these two other sheets. Now, each one of is just a calculation of oh gosh, I can't remember how I did it exactly, but it is what is being displayed. If it's got a unique email address, that's a unique registrant. So that was what we used as the email address, because the confirmation numbers are all over the place. First name, last name can be the same for someone, but have a capital letter one time that they enter it, lowercase the next time. So email address is, it's not exact, but it's as good as we can get. And then our other one is just counting everyone who's appearing on the page. And so each one of those is just a single box on those. It's just a calculated field. I've removed the title. I've removed the header from the column. And then each one of those pages got on the vertical container underneath the filters. So just a simple way. It looks like it's part of it, but it's two separate. And you'll see that a lot with things like, when was this data last updated? If you're using like an extract, you can use a canned field from Tableau that has the last extract date, and you'll do the similar thing. You'll put it on its own page and then add that page into your actual dashboard. So go ahead, next slide, please. So that kind of gives us what it looks like. Now you've got it done, and we want to publish it. So up here on the top, on the menu bar, you've got an option for server. Now we got to sign into it and do our normal rigmarole that you do every time you sign into an ASU thing. And then you can click publish workbook. Go ahead, next slide, please. So when you publish workbook, this window on the left pops up. Now it's got a lot of options there. You might change the name. If you've published before with the exact name, you will get a warning, workbook name is already in use. Publishing will overwrite the existing workbook. So usually that's what you do. If you're working on a workbook, you publish it. They say, oh, that's great, but can we have these two filters added and this sorted in this way? And then so you make those changes and you republish it with the same name, and it gives you this warning every time. So tags, important to add, I guess, for the new analytics portal. So I guess we're going to hear about that later. And then the other thing is, on the sheets, if you click the edit button, you'll see that we've got every sheet that's on the page, including our two dashboards. Now, we don't want to show the single text box that shows the distinct count. So we click the only dashboards button, and it's only publishing the sales and registration reports. And then there's also an option next to data sources for edit. And if you click that, you get your publish type and your authentication. Now we try and embed every time we use, that's why we're using that app ID. If we embed a password, they will not be asked. Make sure you do that. Try and use your app ID and not your personal ID. Next, please. After that, it'll go out to the, excuse me, the bi.arizona.edu page. This is where your reports actually live. The analytics portal takes this information and displays it on an ASU, on an ASU website. A lot of people have been sent links to these reports. Do not send links for BI site. We're definitely being discouraged to do that, and have been for a very long time. But it is still, I see them out in the wild all the time. There's people who are like, oh, this link stopped working. It's like, oh, you're not supposed to use that link. So next, please. And once it's there, after an indeterminate amount of time, I think it's top of the hour, but it seems to be kind of have a little wiggle room. It uploads to analytics portal. And go ahead, I'm sorry, next slide. And you'll see it show up like this. And you see, oh, wow, it looks a little strange. The description is not great. The sales report says it's the sales report, but so does the registration report. And there's a big, or they're smashed together there in the middle. So you're going to want to fix that. It does that on everything, even if you make efforts to like put a space in your file name, it ignores it. It smashes it together. Go ahead and click. So you'll see these edit buttons off to the right, and you click that, and it's just a very straightforward view of what is going to actually pop up. So we went ahead and changed the display title, so it's only saying Executive Education Registration Report. We use that long, complicated file name so that it's easy to organize on our side, but the customer doesn't need to see that. And then we changed the description to say registration report instead of sales report. And we added just a little additional info. Some people probably use this extensively. We don't particularly. I think that they said in the new analytics portal, we'll have a lot more options here for stuff. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm hoping that there'll be a way to put like a data dictionary, table dictionary, something like that in there. Some easy to access information about what's in the report. But as of right now, basic stuff, we click save, please. And it publishes and it looks much better. That's what the people will end up seeing when they click on their reports. So I will point out while we're on this, because we're a power user, we've got all these options at the top, the edit tab, the reports tab, the hidden reports and pages. Your viewers won't see that. They'll only see your splash page, your landing page, and then your reports and pages. So go ahead, next slide, please. So we're done. You click on it. It looks exactly like this. It's just at this point, a report that's out there. We had some intentions of adding some additional tabs that have maybe some graphs, pie charts, those kinds of wonderful things that everybody likes to look at. As of right now, it's just information. Technically, I don't think it qualifies as a dashboard if it's just information. I think it's supposed to have a visualization, but that's what we're calling it. So next, please. Now, were there any questions? Any comments? Yes. So the data itself it lives in Stova. That's the events Eventry, yeah. But it's the event system that they're doing all of these kinds of executive education programs. There's people using it for recruiting programs. So it's that's where the actual data lives. And then we go out and use the API through Alteryx to grab what we need out of it. And then we move that data into those user data, AUDB, the user database tables, and where we've created tables specifically for the stuff we want to keep and use in our reports. So we're taking this big set of data from them, we're paring it down to what we need, we're sticking it in our own tables, and then we connect to our tables when we do Tableau stuff. So, and theoretically, anybody could use the same systems that we're using for their events. Just we actively said, okay, the shared folder ID, I think that's what we ended up using because that's the identifying characteristic in Stova for the executive education group. They've got a shared folder for executive education, and that number is what we put into saying, hey, only give us this. Of course, after we did that, they came back a month later, I think, and said, hey, we've got this program we're running with this other school. It's in their shared folder. And so that all broke down and we had to change it. But that's the, kind of short answer. dbeaver is just the means we're using to look at that data in AUDB, because I know you'd asked about that as well. It's just a kind of a front end. It's a way to, it doesn't necessarily connect to just that data. It's any database. You can use it for, your SQL 2012 server if you want. Correct. Yeah. We grab that data from someone else and condense it down and save it in our own spot. Yeah. Any other questions? No. Go over here.
Other than time spent for question access, like how long did it take that what was the most complex part?
Yeah, it was pretty quick. I'd say probably start to finish, including all these requests, was monthish. I think the large portion of that was waiting the week and a half to get everything through. And then after that, it's not the most complex of reports. It's really pretty straightforward presentation of data from somebody else gathered, right? So once we got past using their API and figuring out how to get that in, it went very quickly. It was.
One thing that I accidentally left out is we had to request a firewall exemption for the API so that the Alteryx server could access it. Because by default, nothing can get in or out.
Very important. Yes. If you are going to a new source of data, you're going to need to put in one of those requests too. I'd forgotten about that completely. Yeah. Somebody else had a question over here? Yeah. Well, unfortunately, I'm not a good person to ask that question of, because I have not. I've done very little in Report Builder, but I've never published anything from a Report Builder. So. Right. So you actually get it published to the BI site, and it never populates. Okay. Yeah. I've seen it take a little while with Tableau stuff. That's what I was saying. Sometimes it'll be like an hour or so, but I've not heard it taking that long. So maybe that's just a special, wonderful thing about Report Builder. Well, I'm sorry. It sounds like something that we could talk to Alexis and Matt about, though, for sure. It's something they can look into. Maybe it'll work a little bit better with the new portal. Who knows? Hopefully, yeah. Andrew?
Slide that Adam presented on the screenshot of the Alteryx workflows. I think it was in the second one where you mentioned there was a tool that you use so that when you run the workflow, it would only pull in records that have changed since the last time the workflow ran, and that saved a ton of time. What was that particular tool?
Can you go back to that slide? It's like, I don't know, slide 8, 9, 10. So what we did is in Alteryx, there is I believe it's called the date time tool. And what it does is it outputs the current date and time. And that, right. So that happens over here in step 1. Or actually, no, wait, where does it happen? Oh yeah, step 1. There's a little clock thing at the very bottom. It's green. That gets appended to our API info, which gets appended to more stuff. And then that blue highlighted thing there, that's us actually polling the last database update time. So we're just doing max of that column. And then that gets joined in as well. And then, we do some filtering. And then that date gets provided to the API in that Python macro. And then the API just spits out everything that's changed between then and now. And then when we actually put it into the database, it's literally called last DB update time. And then that's what we grab again.
There was one more. Yes, sir. So the Stova API, we had to actually I can't remember, it's Steve, I can't remember his last name. It's like Free or something. There is on the Slack, there is a workspace for Stova. It may still be called Eventry, but there is a workspace. And if you get on there, that Steve is the main guy. If you put a question to him, he will answer it. He's very, very prompt to get back to you. But that's what we worked with him. he gave us an initial, he set up an API that was supposed to only have access to our stuff, although we had to expand it and request all kinds of changes to it afterwards because everything changed. So, and then in the end, we were given the actual like production API key that we use in our workflow. So, but he is the man to ask. And like I said, very prompt to respond. So, yeah. Any other questions? Did we get any in Zoom? Nope. Okay. Well, go ahead and give us our next slide. That is it from us. I would like to put up some of these channels. I know that probably all of you are familiar with some of these, maybe not all of them. Maybe you're not familiar with any of them, but these are places that are good to go to get some of those questions answered. Where's that data, especially? I'm probably in there every single day. There's so much data out there, especially in the data warehouse. It's just you can never know everything about it. So we've got the experts from those areas in there actively answering those questions. It's a really great resource. These other ones, not as well, I was gonna say they're not as active, but definitely Tableau gets a lot of questions in it. And ASU data community and analytics announcements are the kind of spots where you go and see new, latest, greatest, announcements and cool tools released and stuff like that. So just I like to subscribe to all these channels. The where's that data, especially. I can't recommend that one enough. All right. Next, please. I think that's it. Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, if there's no more questions, let you guys go 3 minutes early. Thank you.